Welcome to Springs Uncovered, the podcast where local entrepreneurs, new homeowners, and our vibrant community come together to unlock the secrets of success.
We're going to be your go-to source for everything happening in our community. Whether you're a seasoned landlord, a new homeowner, or simply a resident of this beautiful city we live in, we're here to keep you informed, engaged, and connected. Each episode dives into the latest in local real estate trends, important property management updates, and the ever-changing legislative landscape that impacts landlords and tenants alike.
We'll also highlight exciting upcoming events and spotlight the hidden gems around Colorado Springs that make our area so special. Join us as we explore how to properly care for your home, stay ahead of industry changes, and keep you in the loop of everything new in our growing community. Stay tuned for expert insights, community stories, and much more. I'm Lorenys Perez.
And I'm Natalie D. Herrera, and we are your local real estate property managers and hosts for the show. Let's dive in. Welcome, everyone, to our very first episode of Springs Uncovered. Today, we've got a treat for you. We've got Alex Yoder with Dorman Real Estate and Daniel Muldoon with Muldoon Associates. There's a lot of information we're going to cover today, so make sure you grab your coffee and have your glass of wine ready for the end of our podcast so you're covered on all grounds. Just kidding. Alex, why don't you start us off by telling our listeners a little bit about yourself and your background?
Yeah, so I've been doing property management for about 20 years. I started with another company and joined Dorman about 15 years ago. And I am past president of what is now called the Colorado Housing Coalition, and past president of Colorado Springs and Arkham.
I'm Daniel Muldoon with Muldoon Associates. I've been also practicing property management for about 20 years. I am also a past president of the Colorado Landlord Legislative Coalition and interested in talking about property management stuff.
Awesome. Well, welcome, guys. Thank you for taking the time out of your day to speak with us. Alex, if you want to go ahead and just touch base real quickly to summarize the most important bills that were passed last year, that'd be great.
Yeah, so the two that jump out for me are basically the warranty of habitability updates that saw a repeal and replace bill that was 40 plus pages. And then we also had a bill that, I guess maybe I'll let Daniel talk about the second one, but basically around just cause for evictions is what they're calling it, which basically pertains to the reasons that you could non-renew people. But the warranty of habitability is arguably the most difficult bill that we've had to navigate as landlords and property managers, because of the burden that it puts on homeowners and all the liabilities associated with putting tenants in hotels for up to 2 months and all kinds of timelines to react. And there's some communication requirements where tenants can basically tell you however they want that they have an issue, instead of previously where we could sort of dictate how they would notify us. And of course, the reason that that's important is a lot of us that are in professional management are closed over weekends. And so we may find out on Friday at 6 o'clock through some method, a text message, or they may convey it through a vendor that we sent out or whatever it may be. And in some cases, we may be out of compliance by the time we get back into work on Monday. So there's a lot of challenges with even staying compliant, let alone the burdens on landlords and the associated costs.
So yeah, definitely I think cost is important because so much of the timelines are immediate. You have to pay a lot more for after-hour services and vendors. You have less ability to price shop for competitive pricing. So I definitely think that the housing providers' costs are going up, and I think that will ultimately result in either selling off their assets or raising prices consistently to try to keep up with the extra costs and red tape associated with it.
What changes have you had to make to comply to these new laws, Alex?
Oh, man. So we've had to completely redraft our hotel accommodation policy because it's so incredibly confusing on exactly what you have to provide and when you have to provide it and what questions you have to ask and all this kind of stuff. The biggest, I'd say, policy changes have been more around what Daniel was talking about, which is about non-renewals and the just cause for quote unquote evictions. It's really just about just cause for non-renewing somebody at the end of their lease, where we basically had to completely create several forms to sort of adapt based on the reasoning that we're non-renewing people. The other thing that's probably the biggest challenge with that bill is there are many reasons that we may want to non-renew somebody who is a difficult or just kind of nightmare tenant, but who technically is not in violation of their lease in a way that would allow us to non-renew them. So the bill basically covers 6 reasons that you can non-renew people. And sometimes people don't fall in those nice, neat 6 reasons. And so you end up in a situation where you have to continue renewing somebody that you really don't want to renew. And I'll give you an example. We had a tenant some years ago who was in a townhome and he was growing marijuana in his townhome. And we found this out because the neighbors were complaining about the smell. We told him, hey, you need to stop growing marijuana. He said, after cussing our staff out, okay, I'll go ahead and stop growing the marijuana. But from that point forward, so even though he complied with our lease demand, from that point forward, he was just a nightmare, screaming at us, cussing us out every time, every day, personally threatening me, like I'm never going to forget this kind of thing. And so we were stuck with this guy, fundamentally, because now he's technically complying, but he's just an awful human being. And now in this day and age, I use that in my testimony against this particular bill because in this day and age, I would not be able to non-renew that guy. At the time, we kind of said, hey, let's just agree to mutually part ways when the time comes, so that you can kind of plan to do that ahead of time, and we can just move forward because this is just not working. Well, now that's not a reality of our new world. I cannot non-renew that guy unless there's one of those 6 reasons. And they're pretty restrictive.
I think it causes a little bit of housing instability too, because they only get the cause protections after they've lived in the house for a year. So it's like we're not negotiating long leases anymore because you can't get them out if you have to. So you basically have the first year to figure out what the situation is with the tenant and then get them out. So you're less inclined to do long leases. You're more inclined to sort of like hyper focus on the situation during the first 12 months because you got to make a decision before they're there sort of perpetually.
The other thing is and this has been an ongoing debate between lots of property managers on exactly how to handle the 90-day notice requirement. So now if it's not an exempt lease, aka a lease or occupancy period that's over 12 months, we have to give them a 90-day notice, even if there is a bona fide reason. Now there is an exception of 45-day notice for some military situations, but generally we're doing a 90-day notice. So how do you handle that? Do you give tenants a lease, present them with a lease 4 months, 3+ months out, and then if they don't sign, you just non-renew them across the board for failure to sign? Or do you kind of let it bleed into that 90 days, and now you may be in a situation where you're giving them a 90-day that goes past the end of their existing lease, which may not be awesome because now you're going into, let's say, their lease ended at the end of July. Now you're going into a less favorable time of year. And, some companies are just blanket across the board saying, here's your lease. If you don't sign it in 10 days, we're going to post you for non-renewal. I question if that's the best way to approach, because I think that you may end up losing tenants that are like, okay, I guess we're going to leave, that would have otherwise renewed. And, maybe you're hurting your client now because of sort of a blanket approach like that. And so just trying to figure out how to handle that and exactly where to draw the line has been incredibly difficult for us. So.
You know how there's a lot of private owners out that decide not to use property management, to go out on their own. What would you say to them in regards to these? I also follow certain laws, because they don't know everything that we do. They don't go to our meetings. Some of them are not part of the CHC. So what would you say to them aside from keep up?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's like one of our pitches for bringing on new clients a few years ago was you're basically paying us to do things you don't want to do. Like you could, in theory, do what we do. You post notices, collect rent, all those usual things, but you don't want to for whatever reason. Now I think they're paying us because they have to. You literally cannot keep up with what these bills mean. So you're going to have an attorney basically on speed dial. And we've even resorted to using attorneys for almost every posting, the drafting of almost every posting, because between the state Supreme Court not being able to figure out how to interpret the laws, local magistrates having different interpretations of the laws, it's seriously difficult. So I think self-management is very risky.
Very
I think,
risky,
they're putting themselves at a large exposure, and it's probably going to end up costing them a lot of money. Legal fees at some point in time is almost impossible to navigate, even for people to do this all day, every day. So yeah, probably going to have to join classes, join the CHC, get familiar with the laws, read them yourselves, and also have a really good attorney. But even most attorneys right now are overwhelmed and not taking on new clients. So it's tough. I mean, I don't think there's a great answer other than learn the best you can and make sure you're using the right forms and so forth.
Because there's some property managers in town that do lease only, that clients call them, do the lease, I'm the tenant, procure them, and then, so I have one client actually that calls me all the time asking me, so what do I do now? Or they broke the fence, or they did this. I'm like, this is why you need to hire a property manager. You're going to do something, then you're going to stick your foot in your mouth and you're going to get into trouble because you're going to do the wrong thing, even with security deposit or anything like that. You need to abide by the laws. And he just calls all the time.
Mm-hmm.
So I think more and more, any property owners that want to self-manage or are in the process of self-managing, they need to get in the game and be a member of like the CHC in order to stay on top of things. If not, they're going to be calling us every day, asking us for information.
And there are some local groups. I don't know the names or anything like that, but I do know that there are some local like landlording groups for individual homeowners, and I'd say definitely get involved in those things. What's the one out of Denver?
Well,
ICOR
is one of them.
Yeah. ICOR and IRROC are both, they're more of an investment group, but they do definitely talk about some of these things, and they're involved in the legislative process.
Yeah, I love the way that Mark Cunningham actually put it a few months back when he was at our NARPM event. Is everyone can play basketball, but when it comes to your most important asset, do you want LeBron James on your team, or do you want, someone with a court in their backyard to go out and protect their assets? So, we've got the experience and property management experts, in the licensing, the know-how, and we meet regularly to make sure that we're up to date on these things. It's when you're defending your most important asset, you want LeBron on your team.
Yeah. I had this owner call me last week. She is in a nightmare situation with a tenant who, she's like having panic attacks because they're fighting all the time, and this tenant hasn't paid rent for a couple months. She's trying to fumble through this self-managing and trying to remove this person. And I was trying to give some advice or some guidance, but I'm not an attorney. So I kept on pointing her back towards our attorney. Well, she ended up basically posting this tenant in December, and she's about to lose her house. She said, it's about to go into foreclosure. I can't afford to keep this thing. So she posts, but she doesn't do it twice because she doesn't know you have to try twice now. And she went and got the forms from the courthouse, and she's like, the form that I got at the courthouse doesn't say that.
Yeah.
And I'm like, so now you're in January, you're gonna have to restart that entire process, because now you have to post a 30-day demand unless it's a exempt property because the CARES Act, quote unquote, didn't expire. And so that's just one example. And she's crying and just trying to keep her home,
Yeah.
And so those things are those things are very difficult to watch. But it's just so tricky from how you advertise the property and what language you put on the ad. There's several things we have to put on the ad, to what you put on your demand postings, to what you have in your lease.
In your maintenance portal.
Yep, in your maintenance portal, you have to post stuff in English or in Spanish or in the language that the tenant speaks in different situations. The complexity, as you were saying, Natalie, even for those of us who do it every single day and who want to do it well, is extreme. We struggle, even as people, again, who do it every single day, to figure out what the heck to do, because even there are some of the bills that are a little more clear, and you're like, okay, I need to figure out how to live in this new world. Others, and I'd say probably by and large, are not that clear. You end up in a gray area, and you just have to draw a line in the sand somewhere and just pray you don't get sued, because there is no clarity.
Maybe we should do another podcast of us just crying to deter people from wanting to get into
24
it.
hours.
It definitely impacted owners, tenants, and us.
Yeah, and that's I guess
and you and the past ones as well.
Yeah, and I think that's one of the frustrating things is these bills are passed as if they're helping tenants. And I don't think long-term, I mean, you may be helping a select group of tenants, but you're not finding property owners who want to add houses to the housing supply voluntarily. I mean, if people are doing it now, it's mostly because they can't sell them. So as soon as they can, they'll be gone. And then you have big multifamily who's under scrutiny from the state right now. So why would they build? It's like they're obviously going to finish up the projects that they have now to complete because they're already deep in them. But if they're looking at like, well, we have money to spend, should we put more in Colorado where legal fees are exorbitant? Maybe you're going to charge $3,000-4,000 a month, and there's a lot of confusion. But I don't think it's promoting availability or affordability of housing, and that's the guise that it's many of these are put under. It's like just hit it with a hammer and make it go away, and it's like. Yeah, you're going to make it go away, like all the houses, and then it'll be like all the other municipalities that are highly regulated. None of them are affordable. You look at Oakland, where they've had cause for eviction for 30 some odd years. You can't rent a dumpster for $4,000 or $5,000 a month.
And rent control.
Yeah, and rent control. So it's like none of the places that these ideas have been tried have cheap housing. And the argument on their side is, well, we didn't do enough. And it's like, well, what point is enough? It's like, how many more bills do you need us to navigate? How many more houses need to be sold and pulled off of the rental market inventory before you learn that this isn't the way to do it? You should be promoting it. You should be helping people add houses to the supply.
And I think that this affects tenants as well. Like I'm not trying to be, like my daughter would say, a B word. And I'm sure none of us are trying to like mess with any tenants or anything. We are definitely trying to help tenants, clients, ourselves, every company. We're trying to work together. We're not trying to work against anybody here. So when you have an upset tenant that's pissed off because we're following the law, then I'm a bitch because we did something wrong.
Yeah, we need tenants. It's a symbiotic relationship. We need them as much as they need us, and so we really try to foster relationships with tenants to where they want to stick around and continue to rent from us and not give us 1 stars.
Yeah.
So we try to be responsive and follow all these rules. I had somebody 2 days ago who got super pissed at us because we couldn't approve her. And why couldn't we approve her? Because we've had to become way more rigid in the way that we screen and approve tenants because of the laws and the fact that if you have any variance or make any exceptions, you're potentially opening yourself up to liability and this kind of stuff.
Yeah, there's no more discretion.
Yeah. And so I told her, I said, look, your credit score isn't who you are. There's a lot of great people with not so great credit because life has happened to them, but I can't make those exceptions anymore. And it's hard to watch sometimes. Yeah.
I'm glad you touched on that because that's actually was a question that I was going to ask too. Is it seems like this not only affects our owners and property managers, but also the tenants negatively as well. So are there any situations that you can think of that it's affected tenants on your end as well, Daniel?
Yeah, I remember with the portable screening report bill.
Let's talk about that.
I think that passed in 23.
Sounds right.
Maybe it was 23. And everybody assumed that because they had a credit report that they had a portable screening report, which they really didn't. So then there's all kinds of frustration because they go to you guys and they're like, well, they already charged me an app fee and I want to use this. It's not a portable screening report. Go read the statute. What does the statute say? It's like, whatever it says. Like, I can't be your attorney. I can't interpret law on your behalf. I can tell you like how we've interpreted it. What you're giving me is not a portable screening report. So what? So I'm like, well, you got to go pay another app fee and we're going to run the whole process. Why does this have to be so confusing? Like I just came from Florida and I just paid everybody the app fee and they did their thing. But here they tell me I don't have to pay an app fee, but then I do have to pay an app fee. And I have this thing that's supposed to make it so I don't. And then I do. And I'm like, welcome to Colorado. This isn't how it was 12 months ago. You'd have gone to Dorman and they would have charged you an app fee and you would have come here. Or in theory, you would have gotten approved. And everything would be fine, so that's one situation.
Well, let me add to that real quick. So you also have companies or individuals who are selling these quote unquote state approved portable screening reports.
I haven't seen that yet.
And so now I had this happen very recently. And so this lady was pissed because she was like, I literally paid extra money to get this quote unquote state approved portable screening report. And now you're telling me it only has one of the 5 things that are required to be a bona fide portable screening report. And so it's costing tenants more money than what they otherwise would have had to pay because now they're paying for the bogus thing and they're paying for the application at every place that they're applying for.
Are you guys having a lot or issues? I heard yesterday in our meeting about warranty habitability coming more and more. I just want our clients the properties that we do manage along with private owners to understand that if something breaks down,
from little or big, they need to know the procedures and how quick
Well-
we need to take care of it, because I feel like sign owners are tight with money and
Yeah, I mean, it doesn't
like,
matter.
I'm
You
not
can't
fixing
be
it, I
tight.
can't.
Yeah.
Because they've fallen into property management. It's not like they said, I'm going to buy 10 houses.
So we ran
and
into
have
one
managed.
recently that was very frustrating with that, because you can't raise rent and or non-renew a tenant in retaliation of habitability issues.
Correct.
So my guy spends 20 some odd $1,000 chasing repairs in this house over a year, and then goes, I can't afford it. I got to sell it. And the tenant claims, well, you can't kick us out. You're retaliating because we had all these maintenance things, and now you're kicking us out of the house. And it's like, well, we're not retaliating against you, the individual. We're retaliating against the property, because it's like, you can't make those numbers work. So then, we end up in this battle with the tenants of like, we're trying to say it's not you. Like, we're fine the fact that you told us about these things and we fixed all these things, but we can't afford to continue to fix these things. So you got to go at the end of the lease because we're going to sell this thing. And they're like, no, and if you like the statute has some implications on retaliation from landlords, and it's like a deceptive trade practice or whatever the damages are. So you end up in this like, well, what do? You got a guy who's totally broke.
Mm-hmm.
You just burn the house down. I mean, that's not going to help the tenant with a house. So you end up in these situations where it's like, again, okay, so you got a tenant now who's using a law that's intended to protect them to really extort my guy, and he's got no money to fix the problem. And
Not even to replace a simple refrigerator. Some people really just don't even have the money to replace a simple refrigerator.
Fridges are $1,000, $2,000 for cheap stuff now. So it's like, there's nothing inexpensive on the house anymore.
Yeah, I think like 80% of our clients, I think they have one house. So I think there's kind of this perception that if you own rentals, you must own a ton.
You must be rich. Yeah.
But most of them own one house and don't have, they're living paycheck to paycheck too.
And they're mortgaged. They don't even own the house.
And they're mortgaged. So we had to, because the problem that we have as property managers is you may have a situation where we have to react quickly, reasonably, like, hey, the furnace went out or whatever it may be, or I don't know, the house flooded because it's freezing cold outside right now and the pipe broke. And now we're in a situation where we have to house that tenant potentially for up to 2 months in a hotel or whatever else we can find.
While you're being yelled at because it's your fault that this happened, and why haven't you fixed it? Why haven't you fixed it?
Yeah, and insurance is getting more difficult. So the insurance may or may not cover stuff, and now the owner could be broke just from the insurance situation and the damage to the property, let alone the ability or inability to pay for the hotel. So we've had to update our management agreement to basically say, for any reason at any time, on a moment's notice, I can terminate you, because we don't want to be in a situation where we as a management company are now having to pay for a hotel or pay for all these extra things that the owner can't afford, which is a crappy place to be.
Yeah.
I've never had to do that, but I dread the day that I have to tell an owner, hey, your house just flooded. You can't afford to do a hotel. You're fired. Yeah. Good luck. But that's going to be where we're going to end up because we have no choice.
So I think you guys touched really well on why it's important to have the right representation. But me as a homeowner, is it, just point blank, is it time to just sell and get out of being a landlord? Or what are your thoughts on that? Why should I stay in property management?
I think Daniel and I probably have slightly different views on this. I feel like personally, as someone who owns rentals, I like the tangible asset, and I like this community in terms of, just the community at large, but also from a real estate investment side, the fact that it's a growing market, and I have no doubt that my values will pay off in 10, 20 years, whatever it is. So I'm personally a fan of owning the tangible asset, even in this market. I have an edge because I'm involved in this world, and so I can better understand what risks I'm taking. I don't know if I was not in this place, how I would feel. If I was not informed on these matters, I would probably be pretty scared. Kind of getting back to the earlier question, I think very strongly if you're going to do this, it's a little crazy to do it by yourself. If you don't have an expert in your corner shielding you from some of the chaos.
Yeah, I agree.
Yeah, and we're not too dissimilar in our opinion. What I warn people of now is it's going to be turbulent for like the next 5. Basically, every time a new legislative session hits and a new landlord-tenant law is passed, your turbulence is going to be 5 years, in my opinion. So it's like, it doesn't mean that it's going to be bad for you at the individual level. Like, somebody's going to experience some negative implications of this. So they need to be prepared for that. But Will prices go up? Like I just said, historically in the places I looked at that are heavily regulated with the landlord tenant law, the prices have gone up. So if people are willing to go on, I just say you're on a roller coaster that you're not strapped in and you can't get off of. So as long as you're cool with that, then yeah, stay on it and do whatever you want to do. And I got no beef with it necessarily, but the days of the tenant did something wrong, we gave them a 3-day notice to quit, they didn't fix the problem, and we got them out in 30, 40 days, and you lost a couple of grand. You can't even get through legal fees under a couple of grand on most of these right now. So
Right.
Yeah, I think if you're going to do it, you need to have a pretty sizable reserve.
Yeah.
If you're going into this thing paycheck to paycheck and you have $1,000 in the bank, you will fail. There's no way that that's going to work. So the nature of what we have to be prepared for financially as landlords has changed substantially. And so again, I am a fan. I'm a big fan of owning real estate, particularly in Colorado Springs, but I would not do that without a big chunk of change in the bank.
That's
So
great
now
advice.
that we're pretty caught up on what's already happened with the laws, I know there's a lot of property managers that are wondering, and a lot of private owners, and the private owners that don't know what's going on. I want to put them in, keep them in the loop as well. What are the upcoming laws, and how do you see them may be impacting us?
Are we becoming the new California?
Yeah.
Well, I mean, at the state level, we've passed several laws that California wish they could pass at the state level. California has a lot of regulation, but much of it is at the municipal level, like city code, county regulation, something like that. So we have several laws here that don't exist. Like there is no cause for eviction in California at the state level. There are cities that have it. I think Oregon, what's the one up in the Northeast? There's like 2 or 3 states that have the cause for eviction.
Minnesota.
I thought it was like New Hampshire.
It's definitely not Florida.
No, somewhere in the Northeast. But I mean, we have a lot, I think, more onerous state regulation. I think rent control is going to continue to be a thing that the legislators try to address. There has been some bill drafts already this year that the CHC is tracking and working on negotiating. The politicians will tell you, or the elected officials will tell you, that they're trying to address accessibility and affordability. So they want less prices and more options. Nothing they're doing is creating that environment. So I would say, as opposed to listening to the words that are coming out of their mouth, pay attention to the things that they're doing and what those implications mean, because there's really nothing new that we're doing in Colorado. These things exist in other areas. So look at the market areas where these exist and see what happens. But they're constantly addressing what they call hidden fees. So if you have maintenance markups or coordination fees or something like that you're not disclosing to the tenants, that's definitely on the radar. And almost anything that costs the tenant money outside of the base rent is on the hit list.
I think, right now there's a couple bills on the table around several things. Daniel mentioned fees, which we can touch on a little bit more if you guys want us to. But there's also a bill around basically algorithmic devices or algorithms pertaining to pulling comps. And that's tricky because we understand, I'm a big fan of antitrust. I don't like businesses sharing pricing data. But if I'm going to pull comparable properties, that to me is a little bit different. I'm just looking at what other places have rented to get an idea of what I could potentially list my property for. But at the end of the day, the market decides. Even if my buddy is renting his house out for $2,000 a month, that doesn't mean I'm getting $2,000, because the market's different today than when my buddy rented his property out. Right. The market will dictate what I can rent my property for.
Yeah, I often say if I could dictate the rental price, I'd just charge $1 million for everything. If it was just my wave of pen, why would I settle for $2,000 or $3,000 or $4,000? Yeah. I'd make it $1 million or $10 million. And I don't have that ability because there's the tenant on the other side of what they're willing and able.
There's many ways that this is going to impact and is impacting owners, businesses, tenants. That's why it's important for property managers and homeowners to get involved during these legislative sessions. How would you have them be involved, or how would you recommend, aside from joining the CHC and staying in the loop?
Yeah, I mean, I think that's the best way for the self-managed and or small housing provider, because we're the only group in the state that represents the interest of them. So, that we teach things that need to be done, like how to go to the Capitol and do testimony, how to do calls to action. We can provide contact information for their elected officials. We provide a bill tracking report so you can pay attention to the bills that we think have some impact on the rental sector. So, but you just have to be involved in the legislative process. And I think more now than ever. So up until 25 legislative session, there's a supermajority in the state. So the Democrat Party had the House, the Senate, and the governor's office, and they could even veto the governor. Now they've lost the veto of the governor capability, but they still have a majority in the House and the Senate, and they still have the governor's office. And anytime you have a situation where there's no checks and balances, like one party rules all, it just doesn't create an environment where there's any sort of negotiations happening. You basically have no representation. I spoke with one of our elected officials, and he was like, I don't even know why we show up in the minority party. It's like, if this is what the people of the state of Colorado wanted, we can't do anything. So why are we even here wasting taxpayer dollars? We might as well just go home, and the Democrat Party can just do whatever they want. And I'm not making it a political thing as far as which party affiliation you are. I personally don't care. It's just facts. I mean, the Democrat Party runs the state right now. These housing bills are all sponsored by the Democrat Party, and they do what they will, and we do the best that we can. We're just pro-housing provider, so we have several Democrats who are on our side. We like to support them. We have several Republicans who are on our side. We like to support them, but it's just majorly important to be involved in the legislative process because it runs every aspect of your life, from if you can hold your phone in your hand while you're driving to what toilet paper you can use to wipe your butt, what bag you can use to carry groceries. So
That's why we just want to try and keep everybody in the loop.
Yeah.
Our fellow colleague property managers, self-owners, vendors, just even down to the restaurants.
It does make
affecting
a difference. It does make a difference. Even if it's hard to watch, painful, and frankly soul-sucking to be politically involved, and even if we're in an amend position on almost every bill versus being able to oppose and really have a killing effect on some of these bills, the reality is that we've been able to get a lot of good tweaks to some of these bills. But it's tough. So
I think the main reason why we asked you guys to come on the podcast today is because of the leaps and bounds that you guys have been able to make with the CHC in getting a lot of these laws changed or even just altered so they're better. They're not as tough as a blow to us in this industry. But it's good to know that we've got things like the CHC on our side to help fight back. And as a homeowner, just to break it down a little bit into layman terms, what if I'm not up to date with what's going on in the legislative sessions? What if I don't understand the laws that are coming out and all of this is foreign to me? Just break it down simple to me. What can I do specifically to get involved? How can I support the CHC, the Colorado Housing Coalition? How can I support my property manager to stop some of these laws that are making it more difficult to be an owner in this Colorado?
Well, the beauty is being a member of the CHC, the minimum is very low. It doesn't cost much to make a difference. Beyond that, other than just giving money so we can pay our lobbyists and make other efforts, being involved from basically helping us to do what's called a call to action, like doing letters to the Capitol when we're fighting bills, or showing up in testimony. Those are that's I think step one is kind of contributing financially, to be frank.
Mm-hmm.
Step two would likely be helping us with calls to action. What that means is we would send you a link as a member, you click a button, and it goes out to all the legislators basically saying this bill is terrible or whatever the recommended amendments might be. And then lastly, if you have the time and the ability, would be to show up at the state capitol or remotely to help us with testimony on these bills, which I know is nerve-wracking for a lot of folks who don't feel comfortable on a microphone in front of a bunch of people. But that can make a difference too. So.
Yeah, and I think even that's all great stuff during the legislative session, but there's a lot of work to be done outside the legislative session as well. So making connections with your local officials, voting, helping your friends and family vote for the things that are important, because if you can have the correct environment, it fixes a lot of things. But much of what we do in the off season, it is a volunteer board. Nobody's paid. This is just because we're passionate about it, but is contacting local officials, chatting with them before and after, trying to be a resource, because these legislators are not experts in anything most of the time. I mean, they know law or they know their section of life or whatever it happens to be. But we've had lots of conversations with elected officials where they're like, oh, we never even considered that. Or, oh, we had no idea what that implication was going to be. I wouldn't say that's all of it. It would be nice if there was more reception of like, oh yeah, we appreciate that perspective. We'd like to be at the table earlier so that we can make good laws. Like if there's bad apples, we all want bad apples out, period. Like if we're good housing providers, the bad ones make everybody's lives miserable. So we can come to a common ground on that. We can do some stuff, but right now it's not a very collaborative environment at the Capitol, and it would be nice if it was. So get involved early.
Will it really make a difference? What do you think?
Being collaborative or having conversations?
Having conversations.
Yeah,
being
definitely
it does. Yeah. I mean, at the end of the day, I think a big mistake you can make in politics is demonizing the other party. If you can understand where they're coming from, even if you don't agree with their values or their conclusions, if you can come to some kind of common ground and sit across the table from them and have coffee or whatever the setting may be, that can make a difference. Because if you can make a point that they hadn't thought about, they may say, well, shoot, I didn't think about it that way. Let me tweak this thing one way or another. So, but again, it is soul sucking, because when you're sitting up there listening to people give testimony that have no idea what they're talking about, or who are voting on the bill and have no idea what they're talking about, and they're just told by their party to say yes, or told by their party to say no, it's very frustrating. But for the moments that you can make an impact and get through, it's worth the brain damage, in my opinion. So,
Do
yeah.
you have any specific examples of how you were able to make changes to bills? Can you tell me more about that?
So I'll give you one that comes to the top of mind. I want to say maybe 6 years ago, when the CLLC at the time, which is now the CHC, was kicking off, there was a bill that was around applications and basically what application fee you can charge and all this kind of stuff. Well, the original bill said basically that you have to track the exact number of minutes you were spending on every application, and then whatever time, and then assign a value to that, and then whatever time or money you didn't use up or spend, you'd have to refund the tenant, which it would be completely impractical. It would be unmanageable. There's no way that any management company or landlord could possibly comply with that.
Right, or any industry. I don't know anybody who tracks their time and exactly how many minutes they spend doing something.
Yeah, I mean, it would make...
I do 28 hours a day, maybe?
Yeah.
It would make it would have made the cost of just being compliant like insane. And so we basically said that doesn't work in our world, And so for those reasons, they amended it to allow for us to charge the average cost, So let's determine what the average cost is for you as a business, the hard cost to run your applications, and you can kind of do that across the board. So things like that seem small, that make really a big impact.
I have another example too. A couple years ago with the pet fee bill. So the bill sponsors came out with that one, and they're like, "Yeah, pet fees are going away tomorrow. Like you can't charge them anymore." And we're like, "Well, we're just not going to accept pets then." And they're like, "Well, wait a second. Like, there's a lot of people with pets. We don't want a bunch of homeless pets now, and homeless people because they have pets." And they're like, "Well, let's talk about that. Like, why do you charge them?" Well, there's extra wear and tear, and there's all these other things that go along with it. And they're like, okay. So they came out with a little better version.
Yeah.
I don't think we went into support, but it was digestible. So that was our very direct conversation with the bill sponsors on that one.
That was a huge one. Yeah, because they were literally saying no pet deposits, no pet rent. And they were trying to make it so the state was going to provide some kind of $1,000 guarantee or whatever. And that flipped entirely to where the state was like, well, we can't afford that. And now we can do a pet deposit and a moderate amount of pet rent. So I think, honestly, that's probably a pretty darn good example of us trying to find middle ground that can maybe work for everybody-ish. And I wish we saw more of that type of stuff.
Yeah, because in those situations, I mean, I personally don't think it's a horrible thing that if you have a pet, you pay more. Because if you don't have the ability to charge for these extra wear and tear items like pets or whatever, then everybody's just going to pay more. So it's like, instead of this cross sector of people paying a few bucks a month extra and some fees, everybody's got to pay more in a base rent. It's like, does that really force housing prices down? It doesn't seem to me. That math don't really work.
Yeah.
I noticed yesterday at the elite meeting that there's a lot of either private owners or property managers that are either not part of NARPM, which is the National Association of Property Managers, or part of CHC, the Colorado Housing Coalition. How we're not supposed to go out and tell everybody, hey, guess what? This is what's going on. Is there a way that they can go, or somewhere where they can go to learn the laws aside from the CHC, that they can be in the loop so they know what's going on, not just getting in trouble? Because we always tell about property managers, hey, make sure that you're in the CHC, make sure that you're in NARPM, you're coming to all the classes, you're getting all the call to actions, make sure you're reading them, and then you're calling every single one of your clients and letting them know, hey, this is what's going on, this is what you should do, this is how it's going to affect you. And I feel like there's a little group that probably doesn't. There's maybe more than a handful, I'd say.
That's a tricky question, because I think
if they don't know, they don't know.
Challenge is, even if they could find a really good resource, and I don't know how many there really are.
There's not that.
Even if they could find one that was decent, there's no way they're going to be able to be compliant because the depth of it is so extreme. But I don't know if I can share my Facebook group, but I run the Colorado Springs Landlord Forum, which is a Facebook group, and that's one way that you could semi stay in the know, because we try to post about, okay, this bill just passed, or hey, let's do this call to action or whatever. So that is one small way to stay informed. But even if you're on one of those groups, you're still not going to be able to keep up. It's just the reality.
No, it is. It's 100% realistic.
Well, and I think it is the reality that it's just hard to manage without a property manager at the moment. I'd say you're not paying for what they do, you're paying for what they know, because it's just
them to cover your butt.
A different situation than it was 5 years ago.
Mm-hmm.
Yep.
Yeah, and on behalf of property managers in the city, I do want to say thank you guys for the work that you're doing with forming the CLLC, fighting for the last. How long has it been when that was established? 5 years ago?
Yeah, 2020.
Yeah, and Colorado Springs has been a major supporter. Other people throughout the state as well, but Daniel Rogers of All Seasons was on the founding board. Rob Line with Milestone Real Estate was on the founding board. Lyle House out of Denver was on the founding board for the CLLC. So without them and others, it would not be a thing. But the management industry supports a lot of individual landlords, and they probably don't even know how much representation they're getting for free right now. Because like NARPM is specific for residential property managers. The CHC is for anybody who's involved in providing housing for people. So it's like housing providers are getting a huge benefit whether they're a part of the group or not, because we're not arguing that people should have to have a license or should only be able to rent their property through licensed property managers. That's not the conversations we're having at the state. We're having a conversation on why it's going to make it more difficult for people to provide housing. So
yeah, I'm glad you said that, because if you are a member, you are going to be on the loop on what bills are coming up, and that is a way to stay informed. And then we'll also do trainings after the session is over to just talk about, okay, how are the attorneys interpreting these things? So that is a good resource.
And you guys are really good at sending all that, because I am a member and I get stuff in my email all the time.
It's cheap to be a member.
And it's not. For the amount of work that we do in this state, there's not thousands of members. So we would love thousands of members. We can always do more with more. But for what we have, the current board is great. The Lobbyist Liaison Committee is great. Your $120 a year goes a very, very, very long way.
So if somebody's not a member, where do they go to become a member? The simple website.
Well, right now it's because previously the CHC was called the CLLC, and the website currently is the Colorado Landlord Legislative Coalition.org.
And maybe you can put that link in the notes.
That will be changing now that we are making it a name change as an organization.
And I, as a property manager, and I encourage all other property managers that have clients to just send an email to all your owners, all your clients, and just let them know this is the link, be involved. So that way you stay in the loop in case any property managers are not communicating to their owners and letting them know what's going on, or not keeping them in the loop. That's a little dangerous hole to fall into.
Yeah, I don't know how else you stay involved other than this, because there's no other group that does it. So
yeah. And I want to thank you guys for taking the time out of your day to explain the importance of this to our homeowners and how they can get involved and provide support. Just to kind of break it down, it seems real simple. We don't need to know exactly how to fight and how to be a lobbyist. We can support the ones that are doing it for us, with a simple donation, either monthly or annually, a one-time donation, whatever it takes, because these things take time, they take money, they take effort. So for me, it's easier for me just to monthly say, here, help me manage my property better, help me to find better tenants and, not be taken advantage of. So any final thoughts that you want to express to homeowners, tenants? Because I think it's important to note too that tenants can also get involved as well.
Yeah.
This negatively affects them also. If they can come in and say, hey, we're against this too. I didn't know that now I have 90 days to determine if I'm going to move or not. It's crazy things that are pushing them out of their comfort zone too, that they're being affected as well. So any final thoughts that you want to give to homeowners or tenants, anybody?
I'm glad you said that because we actually have tenants on our CHC board. It's not just property managers, or it's both tenants, property managers who are also tenants. And we want balance. We want legislation that works for everybody. We don't want terrible landlords to screw people over, just like we don't want terrible tenants to screw people over.
Sure.
And I guess my final thought kind of in closing here is that we want good bills that work for everybody. And I hope we can find a path forward for that and to really make an impact or change the way some of the more extreme legislators are thinking.
Yeah, and I think the tenant impact, like you mentioned, applications you have way less discretion on, much more particular about screening, because some screenings have been watered down, so you can't use them. So you have to screen other ways. Our application process has gotten more difficult.
Oh.
We require them to provide a lot more documentation for us to review because we can't always rely on credit.
Mm-hmm.
So that's a point of contention. The postings on your door are getting exorbitant because the forms are longer. We're required to post. Everything is an eviction now. There's no more non-renewals, way more legal jargon, way more attorney involvement, way less ability to have a relationship with our tenants. It's much more robotic, much more legal, much more systematic, I think. And I don't think it's providing a better experience for the people in the houses any more than the people providing them.
Yeah.
Agreed, 1,000%. Again, I want to thank our guests today, Alex Yoder with Dorman Real Estate and Daniel Muldoon with Muldoon Associates. I think we got a lot of information out today, in a little bit of time. So if you have any questions, please feel free to reach out to us. We'll put the link to the CHC with the podcast so you know how to join, how to become a member, and you can definitely reach out. Tune in to our next podcast. We covered a lot of topics today, and I think we're going to break those down into smaller topics and dive more into those in depth, like habitability, evictions, more in detail. We just touched a little bit on each topic, kind of a general overview. But again, thank you guys so much for your time.
Thank you.
Well,
Thanks.
Yep. Appreciate it.